Chapter 15. The Parting. The clean night air caressed the bruised and weary bodies of both rescuers and rescued. A faint breeze toyed with the long hair of Princess Yasmina like the fingers of a lover, and the girl stirred on the Cimmerian's broad shoulder. "With a little luck," panted Subutai, "we can be away from this accursed place before they discover us." Valeria whispered, "I think they missed us in the dark and are searching some other passage." Grimly, Conan shook his sable mane. "I hear their armor rattling in the cavern. We must hurry." He shifted Yasmina's inert form so that she lay across his back with her arms falling over his shoulders. "Tie her wrists together, Valeria. I'll need both of my hands to clamber down the rocks." The girl thief undid her girdle and bound the fabric around the limp wrists of the princess, muttering all the while, "If the wench slips down your back, she'll strangle you." Conan grinned. "I'll save that privilege, girl, for you alone." And with shoulders hunched, he grasped the rocky pinnacle and felt for the nearest boulder on the rude stairs that led to safety. As the barbarian started his cautious descent, full consciousness returned to Yasmina. Her drug-induced dreams faded to be replaced by a nightmare of reality. A torrent of falling water seemed about to engulf her. A bottomless black chasm yawned below, and she was being propelled into it on the greasy, ill-smelling back of a giant. Above her, silhouetted on the ledge, stood a man with an arrow nocked in a taut bowstring, and a woman warrior with a dirk gripped in her hand. Yasmina screamed, and her sharp scream tore the tapestry of the night. Conan rumbled a curse on Osric and all his household, adding savagely, "Be still, unless you want to die." But the princess, more in terror than defiance, cried hysterically, "Master! Master, save me! Lord Doom, save me!" Conan, balancing himself precariously on a small rectangle of rock, released one handhold long enough to slap the face that nestled against his neck. Stunned, the girl fell silent. But too late. Sentry fires on the top of the mountain began to glow. Faces peered into the dark void. Missiles whispered past him and clattered on the rocks below. Whether they were weapons or mere stones, he could not tell. One glanced from his shoulder, forcing a grunt of pain through his clenched teeth. Thus, urged to greater speed by necessity, Conan completed his descent, and taking shelter behind a stunted tree, ventured to look up in search of his companions. Valeria, as agile as a mountain goat, was working her way down the rocky stairs. Subutai, still on the ledge, was taking aim at some object high above him on the mountain. As Conan watched, an arrow winged upward, arced, and struck. With a hideous howl, a beast man tottered and then fell, thrashing, into his signal fire. Another arrow sped along the pathway of the first. Another guard, pierced in the chest, staggered on the brink of the precipice. He fell, shrieking, into the gorge, hurtled down the narrow throat of stone, and plunged into the waterfall, before the echo of his cries ceased to reverberate. Even as Conan watched, the first beastmen to discover the cleft began to squeeze through the slender opening. Distracted by the eerie sound of echoing cries, they hesitated on the ledge to make dull-witted inquiry into the source of the bizarre and hollow sound. That hesitation provided Subutai the moment he needed to swing over the ledge and crouch on the stair-like rocks. Then, as they returned to the cavern to report the strange happening, the Hyrcanian clambered down the boulders and joined his fellows, where the land rolled out more gently. "Erlik boiled them all in oil," muttered Subutai, as he inspected his scraped knuckles and raw palms. "That time, I thought it was the end of me." "Let's find the horses before the devils sound the alarm," said Valeria. "We crossed the stream somewhere hereabouts." They strove to pierce the darkness and discover the air-filled skins on which they had crossed the fast-moving water, but the wilderness of jagged rocks and boulders was full of nooks and crannies, whose dark recesses the starlight could not penetrate. At length they abandoned the fruitless search. "Let's follow along this bank until we reach the flatlands," said Conan, picking up Yasmina and slinging her over his left shoulder once again. "But the stream grows wider there, and we desert men are little used to swimming," objected the Hyrcanian. "Well, do the best you can," snapped Valeria. "We'll have our hands full with that stupid girl." With Subutai in the lead, the three adventurers picked their way along the unfamiliar bank of the precipitous stream. They walked in silence, thankful for the cover of the moonless night and grateful that they had eluded Doom and his ape-like sentinels. The burden in Conan's arms slowed their progress, but at least the sleeping princess would not summon another contingent of the guard. Too soon, it seemed, the light of dawn suffused the sky, driving away the friendly stars. Nesting birds rose squawking above the foliage that masked their path, revealing to any who might look their whereabouts. Valeria, bringing up the rear, became apprehensive. "I see a roadway or a path circling around the mountainside," she murmured. "What purpose do you think it serves?" "It leads to a lookout platform for the guards, I have no doubt," rumbled the Cimmerian. "They had sentries all along the way when I made the climb, along with the pilgrim sheep." "No sentries are about this morn," said Subutai cheerfully. "We're near the horses now, once we get across the mill pond. The water's so calm that even I can paddle my way across." "I'll help Conan with the pitch-haired wench." Valeria waded into the pool, shattering the surface like a broken mirror. "Pray Crom she doesn't screech again," muttered the barbarian as he placed the princess on the supporting arms of his companion. When the cold water awakened her, Conan glared at Yasmina and growled, "Say just one word, and I'll drown you here myself." Together, Valeria and Conan towed the whimpering princess across the still water. Subutai, meanwhile, had splashed his way across and emerged on the grassy bank to stand guard as Conan and Valeria dragged the terror-stricken girl away from the water's edge, and then threw themselves, panting, face down on a grassy knoll. With his thief's unceasing vigilance, Subutai's eyes patrolled the mountain path that led to the lookout platform. "Let's go, Conan, ere they sniff us out. Oh, Erlik, look you yonder." He pointed to the sinuous trail on the hillside above them, whereon appeared a group of marching figures. "By Crom, it's Doom and Rexor, with a squad of their subhumans," muttered Conan. "They've discovered us," breathed Valeria. "Doom's pointing us out." Rexor appeared to give orders. The beast men nodded in agreement. Soon they began to scramble down the pathless waste, howling as they came. Although no spark of intelligence gleamed from their pig-like eyes, their hairy arms were huge as they closed in, waving upraised weapons, clubs, maces, and sharpened axes. The sun's first rays lit up their slavering jaws and bounced off the metal studding on their leathern armour. The three companions took their battle stance, with Valeria guarding Conan's back, while Subutai, whipping out his light tulwar, shielded Conan's left. And then the brutes were upon them. Working together, they ducked, twisted, slashed, and thrust. Each parried blow aimed at one of the others, like a flawless fighting team. Moved by love and desperation, in the ecstasy of combat, Conan and Valeria fought more skillfully than they had ever fought before, or ever would again. Bones cracked under Conan's sledgehammer blows. Blood flowed at the touch of Valeria's darting sword. A beastman fell, then another and another. One seized Subutai's tulwar with a bare hand. Ignoring the pain as the razor-sharp edge sheared through skin and tendons, the creature tore the slender scimitar from the Hyrcanian's grasp, then raised his axe for the kill. As Subutai leaped back, cursing, Conan laid open the beast-man's belly. With his back against a boulder, Subutai reached around for his bow, knocked an arrow, and released. Although the bowstring was wet and the arrow's flight unsteady, another attacker staggered off, clutching a shaft half buried in his flesh. As suddenly as it began, the fight was over. Growling, the remaining brutes shuffled off. Like whipped dogs, they made their dispirited way up the hill to the lookout post, where still stood the cult leader and his henchmen. 3 pairs of weary eyes followed the guard's flight up the rough terrain. 3 pairs of eyes lifted to see the regal figure of Thulsa Doom standing, legs wide spread, attended by his first lieutenant. With lightning speed, Doom grasped a serpent which was coiled about his neck, and with a twisting motion he stretched the viper out into a scale-covered arrow. Then, receiving a strong bow from Rexor's attentive hand, he drew the shaft, which but a moment sooner had been a living snake, and shot. Straight for Conan's heart the envenomed arrow sped. Swifter still was the leap of the warrior woman as she made herself a living shield to protect the man she loved. Thus the death-dealing arrow tip entered Valeria's breast and came to rest protruding between her slender shoulder blades. As Valeria crumpled, Conan caught her, and falling to his knees, he cradled her in his powerful arms. Then he looked up and glared with hate-filled eyes at his lifelong enemy. Doom stood watching his lieutenant unstring the great bow. A thin and evil smile spread across his cruel face. Rexor grinned his admiration. He shouted, "Your shot was straight and true, master. Death to the infidel!" The thin smile turned into an inhuman grimace. Across the open space, his answer carried, "Death to all who stand against me." Turning on his heel, Doom walked away. Conan bent over the wounded girl and kissed her pale lips. Then he saw the arrow point protruding from her back and pulled it through, as Valeria, too weak to cry out, gasped in pain. In the barbarian's hand, the missile became a snake again. Overcome with revulsion, he hurled it into the crystal waters of the somnolent stream. "Live. You must live," he whispered. "I need you." Valeria managed a wan flicker of a smile. The wizard told me that I must pay the gods. Valeria's voice was as faint as the rustle of leaves in a dying breeze. Now I have paid. Conan held her against his breast, and their wet hair mingled blonde beneath black in the golden light of the rising sun. A wind sprang up from the Valiant sea. Hold me tight, tighter, moaned Valeria. Kiss me. Breathe your warm breath into my body. He kissed her fiercely, hungrily, rocking her limp body as a mother rocks an injured child. Her face turned ashen. Her long lashes lay like dark smudges on her waxen cheeks. Cold. So cold, she breathed. Keep me warm. Her lips sought his again. Then her hand fell limp on the burgeoning grass. Conan held her close until Subutai touched his shoulder and silently shook his head. Then he buried his face in her hair. While the sun still climbed the azure sky, 3 horsemen reined their lathered beasts beside the shaman's door. Conan dismounted with the limp form of Valeria in his arms, as Subutai flung himself from the lead mount and hurried to release the thongs that bound the princess to the saddle of her horse. The ancient witchman hurried forward to meet them. He peered down at Conan's fragile burden and touched one dangling wrist. The eyes he raised in answer to Conan's silent question were sympathetic and devoid of hope. Valeria was dead. The Cimmerian bore the girl's slight body into the shaman's hut. Subutai, pointing to the captive princess, called after him. I'll stay outside and guard this baggage. You'll want to be alone a while. With the help of the old hermit, Conan laid Valeria on a blanket and stripped her of her soiled and sodden clothing, in order to sponge away the blood and blackened pigment from her pale flesh. The great jewel stolen from the Tower of the Serpent still spilled its frozen fire across the torn breast of the warrior woman. Glowering, Conan removed the serpent's eye, slung it about his own neck, and tucked it into his tunic. That gem, said the wizard. How came the woman by it? It's just a bauble that I gave her, growled the Cimmerian. I have no wish to talk about it. The shaman shrugged and continued to prepare Valeria for immolation. Together they dressed her in a fine silk shift that she had brought in Shadizar to wear on holidays. They crossed her hands upon her breast, and within them placed her sword. They rubbed sweet-smelling herbs upon her brow and combed her long hair. She's beautiful, quavered the shaman. Like a bride. Would that she were, muttered Conan, hastily leaving the hut to help Subutai to gather firewood along the shores of the Valiant Sea. The sun was a fiery ball low in the west when the last piece of driftwood was laid on the funeral pyre. Atop the largest mound it stood, amid the burial places of ancient warriors and kings, and the slabs that marked their resting places formed a guard of honor all around it. Thither Conan carried Valeria and gently laid her down. There, in the rosy sunset, she looked very young, a child asleep. Subutai helped the old wizard up the slope with a lighted taper in his trembling hands. Conan regarded his love with brooding eyes and slowly chanted a mournful pit fighter's song. Blood and vengeance, my sword is singing. Through bone and flesh, the way of the warrior is ever death. Having bid Valeria a last adieu, the Cimmerian reached for the flaming torch, and stepping forward, touched the flame to the dry wood. The fire licked up around her alabaster beauty, burning with an incandescent brilliance. A breeze, sighing from the sea, lifted her hair in gentle fingers, and was gone. Unwavering, the smoke rose into the darkening sky, as if reaching for the evening star. Conan stood like a figure carved in stone. Subutai sobbed softly, tears running down his cheeks. The wizard, roused from mumbling incantations, stared at him. "Why weep you so, Hyrcanian? Was she so much to you?" he asked. Subutai wiped a tear and cleared his throat. She was a friend to me, but she was everything to him," the small man said. "But he is a Cimmerian and must not weep. So I do weep for him." The shaman nodded as he pondered the diverse ways of men from foreign lands. The fire burned to coals and then to ash, and the night wind scattered the ashes far and wide. Through it all, Conan stood motionless. Then, when the last ash vanished, he turned to Subutai and the shaman, saying, "Now, we must get ready." "Ready for what?" asked Subutai. "For them to come against us,"